Hi, welcome to my channel, Math Made Easy with Laurel. I'm Laurel, and in this video we're going to take a look at some examples of markup and margin problems. In my last video I talked about the difference between markup and margin, and let's just review that very quickly. The percent markup is defined as the amount of profit divided by the cost times 100. So a percent markup is based on the cost, whereas percent margin is defined as profit divided by selling price times 100 to change it to a percent. So the percent margin is based on the selling price. So for example, as a business, if we bought an item for $300, that's called our cost, we sold it for $450, that's our selling price. The profit is the difference. So 450 minus 300, which is $150. To calculate percent markup, I would take that profit of $150, find what percent it is of the cost, so divide by the cost and then multiply by 100, and that's going to be 50%. If on the other hand I'm finding percent margin, I'm going to take that profit of $150 and find what percent it is of the selling price of $450. So I divide and then I multiply by 100 to change it to a percent, and that will be 33.3%. So percent markup is 50% and percent margin is 33.3%. Now let's take a look at questions where we might be asked the cost or the selling price when we know the percent markup or the percent margin. Let's start with markup. We're going to use this formula. Cost plus profit will equal selling price. And when we're talking about markup, our profit is based on our cost. So this profit can be described as our percent markup of our cost. It looks a little bit confusing, but our selling price will equal the cost plus our percent markup times the cost. Let's take a look at an example. So let's say the cost of an item is $300 and our percent markup is 40%. In order to find the selling price, we're going to take our cost of $300, we're going to add 40% of $300, which is going to be our profit, and that will give us the selling price. So 300 plus 40% as a decimal is 0.4 of 300 to equal our selling price. 40% of 300 will be $120, 0.4 times 300. So the selling price in this example will be 300 plus 120, which is $420. If you're doing a lot of this type of calculation, you can use a little bit of a shortcut, and hopefully you understand the explanation of it, and if not the explanation, at least the simplified or shortcut formula. What I can do when I'm taking the cost, or 100% of the cost, and I'm adding a percent markup, which is based on the cost, I can factor out cost out of those two terms, and I'm left with, when I factor it out of this term, it's like 1 times cost, so I'm left with 1 plus, when I factor it out of here, I'm left with my percent markup. And in order to use this formula, I need to express that percent as a decimal. So let's take a look at our example. We have a cost of $300, a markup of 40%, which is 0.4. So in order to find selling price, all I need is to take the cost of 300 and multiply it to 1 plus 0.4. Or in other words, multiply it by 1.4. Another way to think of it is our selling price will be 140% of the cost if we're given the percent markup. So when we multiply, we get $420 for our selling price. So you might find that you, if you're doing a lot of selling price calculations when you know the cost and the percent markup, this shortcut might be best for you. Now let's take a look at the formula that we're going to use if we're doing margin questions. With margin, we still are going to use the formula cost plus profit equals selling price, but with percent margin, our profit is going to be a percent of our selling price. So the way I'm going to rewrite this is I'm going to write it as selling price minus the profit equals the cost. Okay, so I just subtracted profit from both sides. And this profit will be, if it's percent margin, it will be based on the selling price. So the selling price minus percent margin times the selling price will equal the cost. Let's take a look at an example. Let's say we have an item whose selling price is $500 and the percent margin on that item is 30%, which is 0.3 as a decimal. We want to find the cost. So we're going to take the selling price of $500. We're going to subtract 30% of 500, our percent margin as a decimal, times our selling price. So 30% times 500, and that will equal cost. So it would be 500 minus 30% of 500 is 150, and that would be $350. Again, if you're doing a lot of calculations involving margin, you probably would like a bit of a shortcut. Similar to the way I found the shortcut with markup, we've got selling price and selling price in these two terms. I'm going to factor it out. So the selling price, when factored out of the first term, I will be left with a 1 minus, and then the percent margin. And that will equal cost. Let's take a look at how that works with our example. Our selling price is 500. If we multiply that by 1 minus percent margin 30%, so 0.3, we will get cost. 1 minus 0.3 is 0.7. And one way that you can think of that might make it make sense, if your margin is 30%, that means 30% of the selling price is profit and the rest is the cost. So the rest would be 70%. So what I'm doing is finding 70% of the selling price to get cost. I get the same value doing it this way as I did when I used this formula. So in both examples, the one that I did of markup, I knew the percent markup, but I also knew the cost. In this example, I knew the percent margin, but I also knew the selling price. So it makes it easy when you're given the number that's actually the base for the percent. What happens though if you're not given that number? Let's take a look at a couple more examples where I don't know that number that the percent is based on, and I'll show you how you handle that. So in my first example, I'm told the cost of an item, I'm told the margin, and I'm asked to find selling price. The mistake that most people will make here is they will take 30% of 700 and add it to get the selling price. The problem with that is that we're given margin, not markup. That method works when we are given percent markup. In this case, we're given percent margin, which is based on the selling price. So because it's based on the selling price, I'm going to use this formula, selling price minus the percent margin times selling price equals my cost. And I'm going to let the selling price equal X. So selling price is X minus 30% of X, so 0.3, times the selling price, which is X, equals the cost, which is 700. X means 1x, so 1x minus 0.3x would be 0.7x. Now we divide both sides by 0.7. That will cancel. I'm left with x. 700 divided by 0.7 will be 1,000. So if our cost was $700 and our margin is 30%, and that's based on selling price, our selling price must be 1,000. And we can do a quick check. 30% of 1,000 is 300. If we subtract that from 1,000, we will get our cost of 700. So it's a little trickier. We have to use some algebra when we're given the percent, but not the value that that percent is based on. Now let's do a percent markup question where we know the selling price but not the cost. So in this next example, we know the selling price is $2,000. We know the percent markup is 25%. Remember, markup is based on cost, not selling price. We want to find the cost. We cannot take 25% of 2,000 and subtract it. We only can do that if we know the percent margin. So in this case, because we know markup, the formula that we're going to use is cost plus percent markup times cost will equal our selling price. Again, we're going to let x be our unknown, so cost will be x plus the percent markup times the cost. 25% is 0.25. So 0.25 times our cost, which we don't know is x, will equal the selling price, which is 2,000. Now to solve this, I'm going to add these two terms. This is like 1x. 1x plus 0.25x is 1.25x equals 2,000. Divide both sides by 1.25. That allows us to isolate x. 2,000 divided by 1.25 will be 1,600. So our cost is 1,600. Let's do a check. If our cost is 1,600 and our percent markup is 25%, 25% of 1,600 is 400. If we add 1,600 plus 400, we get our selling price of 2,000. So you have to be careful when you're given questions and the percent is not based on the number that you're given. You have to do a little bit of algebra. The most important thing is to remember percent margin is based on selling price, percent markup is based on cost.